If you were a teenager in the early 2000s, I can only assume that you were part of AO3 and fanfiction, and Omegaverse is not something new to you. I was also very deep into AO3 during that time, to the point where I was even writing Teen Wolf fanfiction, though it was so long ago I don't remember my username. Even if I came across it to this day, I probably wouldn't know that it was mine. So, these books I'm going to share with you today are sort of the adult version of me, version of Omegaverse that I have been thrilled to find, enjoying so very much, and absolutely needed to share it with you. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sasha. I am a aspiring author who hopes to have a romantasy novel available for purchase sometime in the future. I'm still writing it, so that is a goal definitely for the future. I also am an avid reader. I have over 300 reviews over on Goodreads. I have a personal blog where I also post my reviews. I'm doing videos on TikTok. I'm posting things like book to outfit recommendations over on Instagram and Lemonade and Like to Know It. I'm on the internet. I'm plugged in. You know what else I'm plugged into? Omegaverse. And because I'm on the internet so much, I was on Instagram one day and I journeyed over to my FYP because I was going to type something in, and I saw this little photo. It's on the screen now, right? And I saw that and I said, oh my god, I know this is fan art, probably for a reverse harem book. I need to know more. Then I found out it was posted by the author, and it's not just a reverse harem, it's an Omegaverse. I was so sucked in, I was so sold. I immediately downloaded the first 3 books by this author. It was The Scent of Us Part 1, The Scent of Us Part 2, and then The Heat of Us. So this author is Eliana Lee. She writes Omegaverse, and her Omegaverse are so comforting. They're comfort found family reads with some trauma sprinkled in, because I feel like that's kind of an essential factor in Omegaverse. Like, if you're going to have an alpha and a beta and an omega, you kind of need a reason for them to protect the omega and for the omega to seek the comfort and protection and healing of the alphas and betas. That's definitely not the case all the time, but it is the case for our characters in this first duology. So in the very first book, The Scent of Us Part 1, our Omega is bonded sort of against her will. She was sold to these very abusive, bad alphas. They money launder, they are probably murderers, like they are bad, bad, bad guys, okay? And so she is trying desperately to get away from them. There ends up being a new program where you can get this injection and go through therapy to break the alpha and omega bonds, and she does end up going through that program. That's not too much of a spoiler because obviously the whole rest of the story is with her new pack, but the trauma that she had from her original pack and from her family are sort of what propelled the story further. Not only does this story have really great found family representation, it also has a bunch of different cultural representation from each of the characters. There are some really sweet scenes where we get to see them sharing meals and sharing about their families and their backgrounds and things like that. These books are the spiciest you will ever come across. This is not an Omegaverse for the weak. This is not an Omegaverse as your first time baby Omegaverse. This is not that. This is definitely for more seasoned Omegaverse readers. If you don't know what a knot is, you shouldn't start here. I would highly recommend Bride by Ali Hazelwood if you're looking for a baby's first Omegaverse to hold your hand through all of these topics that would be new to you. This is definitely something for someone who has been around the genre for a little while. I did actually like Book 3, The Heat of Us, the best out of all of them. So the first two books focus on one pack and it ties up their story. The third book has characters we met, peripheral characters, sort of making their own pack. So we have the pack from book 1 and 2 and a new pack in book 3. This book was so great, and again, really nice representation of different cultures. This book also had two main characters who were sex workers in this world, and I thought it tackled the topics of things that sex workers have to deal with in such a realistic and also respectful way. And I really enjoyed reading about all of the ins and outs and sort of like behind the scenes of how things get filmed, what the scheduling is like, what harassment can look like when it comes time to blocking someone, sort of all of these things that if you've never looked into sex work, if you've never even thought of it before, can be really, really eye-opening, and it's definitely one of the most sex-positive Omegaverse books I've read so far. And I feel like Omegaverse inherently is sex-positive just because there's so much sex in these books. There are a lot of heavy topics discussed with our main Omega and also her alphas and beta. They are all bringing different baggage to the relationship, and some of it is just like normal everyday, every single person who's alive on the planet has baggage, and some of it is really deep and traumatizing, and it was really beautiful to watch all of these characters work through these things together. And again, the found family aspect when they finally realize they have other people they can rely on and that they're not alone. So this book, The Heat of Us, definitely my favorite out of the series. For all the books I mentioned in this video, I do have full written reviews available on my blog, which is readwithmesashamarie.com, if you want to look more in depth at what some of the trauma might be detailing, what some of the plots might be in more detail. These videos are just trying to get the books in front of you and give you enough information that if you are curious, you can look into it more yourself. So when I initially found Eliana Lee on Instagram, some of her other posts were tagging another author, Amelia Emerson, because they have an Omegaverse coming out together set in the same world this fall. The way that I understand it is that they're each writing one book or one novella or one story, and they're going to be two separate packs, but each pack lives in this same world. So hopefully characters are going to overlap, hopefully they might meet and mingle, or it's just the world in general. I don't really know what's going to happen yet, but they have been posting a ton of teasers and reading just little lines and snippets, and I'm so excited. Having a fall Omegaverse come out, I think it's like fall and holiday potentially. Please check out their Instagrams for the full information so that I'm not screwing this up, but I'm really excited about it. So of course, I knew I liked Eliana Lee's work. I wanted to see if I would like Amelia Emerson's, so I decided to pick up Forbidden Part 1, Forbidden Part 2, and then Cherished. And in the same way that The Scent of Us and The Heat of Us are two different packs, Forbidden Part 1 and 2 is one pack, Cherished is a whole brand new pack and a standalone. So when it comes to Amelia Emerson's Omegaverse books, they are much darker. They deal with very traumatic on the page scenes, and there was a lot in Forbidden Part 2 that I had to skim over and couldn't read every line of because it was just too triggering for me. So my recommendation before you go into either of these books is to check the trigger warnings, check some of the reviews out there. It deals a lot with sexual assault. It deals a lot with degradation and not in a consensual way. It deals with a lot of trauma from men and doctors who should have been protecting our main character, but who were in fact abusing her instead. There were just a lot of traumatic events in our Omega's life, and it sort of led her in a roundabout way to finding her alphas, because she ends up going into heat for the first time in her life in like a Trader Joe's, basically. And one of the alphas that becomes her pack is there and helps her get medical care. And as the story progresses, she ends up with this pack. Learning to trust them is incredibly hard for our main character, and I think it's even harder because each of our alphas have lived under this same sort of terror and bad political regime, and it has affected their own individual families. And so they want to do everything they can to protect their Omega, and she wants to do everything she can to heal the hurt in their past. So everyone is working for a common goal, but the way that we get there is very roundabout and definitely not a straight line. Similarly, with Eliana Lee, I prefer the standalone Cherished over the duology. I think for this standalone, I prefer it. It could definitely be a duology. It's like over 700 pages. But this Omega is chronically ill, and she doesn't know what's wrong with her. She was also abused and tortured in a similar way to the previous Omega because they were at the same program together. So she has to overcome a lot of that fear in order to try and get answers on what's wrong with her health. There is and is not a happily ever after, in that she's not necessarily cured at the end of the book. And I think, as someone who's chronically ill and who will be chronically ill for the rest of my life, that was such a beautiful thing to sit with. And I cried through this entire book. Like, let's just get that out of the way right away. The found family aspect is still there. The comfort of these characters together is still there. But watching her go through all of this pain every day, watching her body sort of fall apart and her not know why or not know what's going on, is so deeply personal and relatable to me. And while reading this book, I just was having so many personal connections to it. So I think if you're chronically ill and you're in a place where it won't make you backtrack mentally, but you're fortified enough to read about a character who is going through a similar journey to you, I think this book is such a breath of fresh air. It made me so hopeful for my own future, which I was not expecting at all. And I cherish this book in such a very specific way, and I will talk about it forever and ever. And I just love it so much. I really want to get myself a physical copy so I can just reread it anytime I'm not feeling well and I just need a reminder that, like, I'll get through this. So that's Cherished. That's where we're at. The other thing I really liked about Cherished was that her Omegas, unlike some, or not her Omegas, her Alphas and Beta, unlike some of the other characters where they might have known each other prior or they were already in their own pack before, each one of them was an individual person who didn't have the same job, didn't have the same past, and hadn't really interacted with each other before. She brought them all together. So she meets them all individually and then brings them all together when she goes into her heat. And that was super cool to see because we had like an attorney, we had someone who was previously in jail. You have just like all of these different people and characters who all have the same goal of keeping her safe, of getting her the help, the medical care that she needs, and taking care of her while she is trying to also take care of them. Wonderful story, so sweet, so amazing. I had such a great time reading it. I am on the edge of my seat waiting for whatever this sort of group project will be between Eliana Lee and Amelia Emerson. Amelia Emerson also goes by the name Amelia Rossi, with some mafia and dark romances, which also I've heard have chronically ill main characters. So I need to check those out. They're on my list, but I haven't personally read them yet. I just wanted to mention it. I think I'm going to end this video here because I've just been rambling about how much I love these Omegaverse books. If you have any questions about them, you can let me know down in the comments below. Again, I go into way more detail in my blog written reviews if you're interested in that. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!